Kara Shalom. Welcome to our watercolor journey. We're going to share 3 techniques to create interest and perspective in an otherwise ordinary landscape. The materials used are listed in the description below. On the palette, we have cobalt blue, light red, a grey premix made from cobalt blue and light red, lemon yellow, Payne's grey blue shade, and a green premix made from lemon yellow and Payne's grey blue. Color alternatives are listed below. Heinrich is working on a Winsor & Newton block, which is lying at a 45-degree angle. Heinrich uses the Hwahong Hake to wet the paper about 2/3 down to prepare the sky area. He starts off with cobalt blue and adds the paint in streaks, going lighter when he gets closer to the horizon. He does not clean the brush and dips directly into the grey mix and adds that to define the white clouds. Because the paper is very wet and it is at an angle, the paint flows downwards and creates interesting cloud formations. Here he dips the same unwashed brush into the green mixture and paints the base layer for the trees in the background. He's working wet on wet, so the colors blend nicely to form different tones. Now he uses light red and the tip of the hake to add streaks of paint to the foreground. This will establish the basic terrain formation. He uses dabs of color from the palette and works very lightly with the tip of the hake. Be careful if you do decide to use a hake or a good flat brush here, as they tend to hold a lot of water. Dab the brush on a paper towel if you find that it's too wet. He adds lemon yellow to bring a bit of light to the foreground. Lemon yellow has a tendency to have a greenish tint, so it is ideal for a light tone in the foreground. Heinrich felt the sky needed a bit more oomph, so he added a slightly stronger mix of the cobalt blue to the sky area with a number 8 Rosemary brush. Be careful when you do this, the background is still wet, so if the newly added pigment is too wet, it will cause unwanted blooms in your sky. Note that the color is much more diffused again closer to the horizon. He adds a touch more grey to the newly painted blue areas to define the clouds. He adds dabs of Payne's grey for the next layer of trees or bushes to the horizon line, still working wet on wet. Allow the painting to dry thoroughly. He uses the belly of the number 5 rosemary and some of the green mix to add the foliage for the trees. The brush is fairly dry and the mix has a milky consistency, so the dry brushing works well here. If your brush is too wet, it will leave blobs of paint and you won't achieve the loose leaf effect that the dry brushing can give you. Dab the brush on a paper towel if you think it's too wet. He adds touches of lemon yellow or Payne's grey to vary the tone on the foliage. Play around with the colors on the palette to make the leaves more interesting. Remember that the foliage is never a uniform color. Sunlight and shadow create a lot of variety in the leaves. Heinrich uses the Princeton Aqua Elite No. 1 rigger to draw in the trunks and branches. He lightly adds the branches in the canopy where there are open spaces. This allows for a more natural look. Solid branches will look artificial and forced. He uses the tip of the brush to ground the trees with a grey mix. This also helps to define the horizon line a bit more. At the moment, the painting is starting to take shape, but it still lacks interest. So he adds a rickety fence. Note that the fence poles are of different heights and thickness. Again, this helps to create a more natural look. Also, they are rather far in the distance, so there shouldn't be a lot of detail. It's simply a suggestion of a fence. Adding a few rocks and darker patches in the foreground defines the terrain some more and starts to give your painting more dimension. He uses the belly of the rigger to dry brush some texture into the terrain. He allows the painting to dry and sets it upright on an easel. This is a good way to review your work. Stand back and see if your composition makes sense and if your tones and values are adequate. Heinrich feels that the foliage in the trees lack depth, so now he adds some shadows to the trees. He uses his finger to spread the paint. This is an easy technique to help with a more natural look. He also adds a bit more shadow to the fence poles and the foreground. Then he uses the Rosemary number 5 to add a few splatters. The foreground is dry, so the splatters will not diffuse. They dry in tiny dots and give the illusion of small rocks in the field. He also splatters a bit of green on the trees to create a few loose leaves. After he had signed it, he looked at it again and found that the trees on the left look as if they were at the same height. The perspective was out. So how do you fix that? He added a bit more shadow to the tree on the right and extended the trunk downwards. This immediately brought the tree more forward. He also wet the trunk of the tree on the left and then dabbed some of the paint out with a paper towel. This made the tree lighter and pushed it further back. So, in a few easy steps, he created some perspective in an otherwise one-dimensional scene. Your support is very valuable to us, so would you please be so kind and press like and comment on this video. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already. It would help a lot to place our channel on the map. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you again soon. Vaya con Dios.